Welcome back to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. Thanks for all the likes and comments on the last video. And now let's start with the first story. It's called Following Policy. Last week I got ripped a new one because I needed to work from home to finish some urgent tasks ahead of a conference I had to attend the following week. I was explicitly told that I could not work from home without prior approval and that I had signed a policy about it. I responded that my job regularly requires me to work from home. The reply: "You signed the policy." So now, after I leave the office, I turn off my work-issued cell phone and I don't look at it on the weekends. I'm a salaried employee, but I'm not going to beg to be allowed to work from home. This weekend I got a call on my personal phone from another manager, asking about approving some billing rates that were due. I told her I wasn't allowed to work from home, and that I'd get to it on Monday whenever I had the opportunity. Everything would be late, but I signed the policy. It would have cost them nothing to just let me do my job. I already get paid a fixed rate. But if they want to play stupid games, they can win stupid prizes. The next story is called Limo Service. Years ago, I worked as a consulting engineer for a company with a very tight-wet CEO. Everyone else there was great. I engineered a machine that shipped to the Far East and was asked to go on site to start it up. This was in the Northeast in February. To save my client money, I parked in an off-site airport lot instead of using the on-site parking. I flew out on a cold, clear day and landed many hours later. I spent over 2 weeks working long hours starting up the system. So many hours in fact that I decided not to charge any overtime out of courtesy to my client. When it came time to leave, I asked if they'd cover limo service to get home. My car was frozen solid and I'd just flown more than 20 hours and was completely sleep deprived. The answer was no. Only full-time employees got limo service. Consulting engineers had to drive themselves. That was the CEO's decree. So I charged full overtime for every single hour beyond 8, right down to the all-nighter I had pulled on site. It turned out to be the most expensive $80 limo ride he never paid for. The third story is called The Best Share. A while back, my wife and I were in the process of buying our first home, after renting for a few years. There was a delay in the new house being ready, so we temporarily moved in with my mother. During that time, I brought a few personal items to work for safekeeping, including my own office chair, a second-hand Herman Miller Aeron, which was significantly more comfortable than the standard chairs in the office. After a few days, I noticed the chair kept ending up in the conference room each morning. I didn't think much of it and just wheeled it back to my desk. I was working early hours, usually 8 to 4 to avoid traffic, so I was always in before most of the staff. After a few more days, the chair stopped appearing in the conference room and started showing up at the CEO's desk. He typically didn't arrive until around noon and held meetings later in the day when most of the team was gone. Each morning I would quietly retrieve the chair and bring it back to my desk. We had an open plan office, so I never entered his space directly. He would occasionally shoot me a disapproving look, but he never said anything. Eventually, the CEO's assistant, who was always kind and professional, approached me. She explained that the CEO didn't think it was appropriate for me to have a nicer chair than him. He was concerned people might mistake my desk for his, and it was causing stress to her, having to quietly retrieve the chair each morning on his behalf. I told her I understood and that I'd stop moving it. That lunch break, I took the chair out of the office entirely and put it in my car. The next day she came by and asked where it had gone. I calmly told her that, since it was deemed inappropriate, I simply stored it in my car. She looked stunned for a moment and then quickly walked away. Because I was always one of the first to arrive, I had a parking spot close to the entrance. For the next several weeks, most of the office, including the CEO, would walk past my car and see the chair sitting in the back. I was never asked about it again. To this day, I'm fairly certain they assumed I'd eventually give in and just let the CEO keep the chair. Instead, I got to tell the honest truth about why it was sitting in my car for weeks. The last story is called Travel Policy. A few months ago, I had to travel for work. At the time, the company had recently implemented new cost-saving measures. As a result, even if travel was authorized by a supervisor and required for business purposes, a funding letter from the finance department was now required in order to allocate funds correctly. I complied, obtained the necessary funding letter, and traveled a few hours away to my work location. Midway through the trip, my schedule opened up and I had a few days off. Knowing that I would be working again the following week, I decided to check out of my hotel, drive home to spend the weekend with my family, and then return when work resumed. That seemed like a reasonable solution. I saved the company several days of hotel costs and per diem, and I got to spend time with my family. However, when I submitted my travel claim, the finance department considered it two separate trips. The issue was that I only had one funding letter, and although the letter covered the full date range of my travel, it was not valid for what they deemed two separate trips. Even though both trips fell within the same approved travel window, this technically triggered a lengthy back and forth. It ended up taking about 6 weeks to resolve. In the meantime, I had to pay off my company credit card using personal funds, covering all expenses until the issue was sorted. Eventually, the money was correctly allocated and I was reimbursed. But it was a frustrating experience. Not long after, another work trip came up. I was issued a new funding letter. I drove to the same general area, worked for a few days, and once again had a break in my schedule. This time, rather than checking out of my hotel, I simply left the room as is, drove home, and spent a few days with my family. Now I'm sitting on my couch, while the company continues to pay for an unused hotel room and daily per diem, because that's the only way to avoid violating their process. Presumably, this meets finance's expectations. Thanks for watching the video to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. And if you have time, watch another one of my videos. Also, if you want to support me further, check out the channel membership or Patreon. And now, I hope you have a great day. See you soon. Bye bye.